So what are 5 signs that you have a wounded inner child? I'm going to talk about them today. Hey, if you're new to me, my name's Rochelle Walsh. I've been a complex trauma therapist for many years, and I have a neuroscience-based paired with Christian faith program for women overcoming overwhelm. So I want to talk about this because the wounded child is something that if somebody's been in therapy or they've done ego state works or IFS that they're familiar with, but I think sometimes, most people that are pushing through that I see, they're really not aware of this. So it might be unfamiliar language, but I think you'll recognize some of the symptoms. When I think of somebody that has a wounded inner child, what we're talking about is not someone that necessarily has to have had a lot of complex trauma, though they might have, but it's also just that some developmental needs, emotional needs got missed, or some things happened. It may have been from, absence of attunement from a caregiver. It can also just be that hard things happened in the family and there's a part of the self that got exiled or wounded and is kind of stuck there. So here's some 5 signs. One evidence that someone has a wounded inner child is that they're not comfortable with their own emotional states. So they really stay away from those feelings that might be associated with vulnerability or fear or needs or wants, and they really focus instead on outward performance, perfection, producing. So it's more about the doing, but they feel uncomfortable with just being still, or just being with themselves in their thoughts or emotions. Oftentimes a signal that there's a wounded inner child, that they don't want to go inside because they don't want to get close to that. They don't want that pain to come up and be revealed. The second sign is that they're very outward focused for regulation. So this might come in the form of an addiction, like a substance. It might be in relationships to other people, codependence in other relationships to other people. It might be in overachievement or overpleasing, like I've got this achievement, I've got this, constant validation from others on the outside. So they are attached to others or outside things for a sense of regulation. I'm okay if this, I'm okay if everything's okay in my relationships, if I've made everybody happy, if I'm indispensable to others or an organization. So outward focus for regulation. And if it's not, then I'm not okay. Or if someone I love is not okay, then I am not okay, beyond the normal compassion that we have for those we love. A third sign is that really taking on the emotions of others, which kind of blends into this, what I just talked about. But you will oftentimes hear people say, not only did my friend share something with me and I had compassion, but it stuck with me. I couldn't shake it. Or I walk into a room and I feel the emotions of everybody. I have a hard time separating how I can have compassion and empathy without feeling the same distress as the other person. So I take on the emotions of other people. Can oftentimes indicate there's a helplessness associated with experienced emotions. So therefore the other person's emotion triggers that wounded child within us, and it makes it hard for us to regulate. And a fourth sign is that they're caught in a chronic state of not enough. I always should be doing more. I am not enough. I need to be doing more. And this constant state of not enough, although at some level, I think it's fundamental to all of us, with people that might have a wounded inner child, this constant state of not enough is a real constant stressor. It's a lack of safety, because when we think about it, if we're not enough, if we're not in the tribe, if we're not worthy of care, if we're not worthy of love, if we can't depend on other people to see our value and want to protect us, then our neurobiology says I'm alone in the world and I'm not safe. So it's a constant state of stress. And also this leads to depression, right? And then the last thing is that people with an inner wounded child oftentimes will have a very hard time receiving, even though they crave love and connection. They have a hard time receiving compliments, taking in the good. So while they may receive love or attention or approval or have successes, they have a hard time really internalizing that because they lack a sense of inner compassion, which goes along kind of with the first thing that we said, that they have a hard time attending to their own emotional states. So they're lacking that inner compassion, which, by the way, can be built. So the good news on thinking about a wounded inner child is that if you have a wounded inner child, that means you survived childhood and you are here. And there is nothing that happens in our history that has to define who we are today. It is helpful to understand the imprint and to recognize some of those things, but really all these things we're talking about, nervous system regulation, core belief reprogramming, emotional regulation, those things that can, if we realize we have a faulty template, we can rewire those things, but it does take consistently. There have to be consistent practices that target the right areas of the brain, and you have to do those things consistently enough on a daily basis to really get to the other side of that. We can talk about exercises like practicing inner compassion for our emotional experiences, but we also have to be able to move through the really uncomfortable body sensations that come with repressed emotions. So there is a way of rewiring some of this, but really in the end, when we can have inner compassion, we become the number one first responder to our own emotional states. And if you are a believer like me, that I am the 911 responder with the Lord, right? Internally. And that gives us a lot of confidence moving forward, because we can now connect with other people from our adult self rather than this wounded inner child that is subconsciously wanting to fix those old wounds through new relationships. So there is always hope. We get a new set of neurons every day. All of these patterns can be shifted and broken with consistency and the right strategies. I believe it's definitely consistent with science, and I believe it's definitely consistent with the Word of God that tells us our mind can be renewed. But it does take action on our part. And if we are someone who wants things to change, if we want to break a cycle, if we have a wounded inner child and we don't fix that, then we are not going to have it fixed in our children, right? It starts with us. So we have to be the kind of people that are going to take responsibility for recognizing that though it might not be my fault, it is 100% my responsibility to fix it. So hope this is helpful. Follow me for more information. I do have a masterclass that's linked below. It helps you understand the brain and the nervous system and my approach for helping women go from overwhelmed to calm and confident in their emotion. Hope this is helpful. Bye.